Hi, my name is Chris Hansen. Today we're going to build a ScrapTail. My technique is to do it in modular pieces. And what I mean by that is you have lengths of your tail created to the width that you want, and they all end with a 45-degree cut. So that as you finish your kite modules, you can put together a tail cut on 45 degrees and then add together your modular cutouts and end up with a tail, and make as many modules as you need to create as long of a tail as you want. So we do it by building on a board. I use poster board and I draw this pattern on the board, all at 45-degree angles. By measuring the size of the board, you can tell how many square inches you can get. You can actually calculate how long your kite tail is going to be from each piece of each rectangle that you make. This board ends up being exactly 10.5 feet of tail, I believe. So if we have a 2-foot lead-in, we have a 2-foot tail coming out the back end. How you like to do fork tails. That should make almost a 15-foot tail when we're all done. So what we have here is an example of a tail I've made about a year ago. This is all done with modular pieces, but it ends up so you can't see it's very difficult to see the joints where the kite was joined together with the modules. I put tape in here so you can see between the blue stripes there is one module. Between the tapes here is another module. But if I take the tape off, it's really hard to see where the pieces are joined together. The other thing that we're going to pick up from this class is my technique of using a tacky spray on the poster board that enables us to place our pieces and hold it in place, and then once it's on the board, we can glue or hot tack the pieces together and then pull the whole sheet up and move it to the sewing machine and sew away. The way I originally learned how to do tails was to just start sewing 2 pieces together, cut a line, sew another 2 pieces together, cut a line, and eventually you build up to a huge sheet, and then you cut strips out of that. But you end up with a lot of waste, a lot of small pieces sewn into the tail, and it takes about twice as long to do a tail as it takes using this technique. Building the kite, or in this case the tail, on the tacky board enables to get a very, very smooth kite when it's done. All of the pieces are laid flat and then secured into place before it's pulled up and put on the sewing machine. So you can be very guaranteed that the kite, after it leaves the sewing machine, is going to be flat. It's the same technique I used for doing this kite, for instance, where I have lots of curves, lots of places where the material could bunch up, but it was all laid down and then glued in place before I peeled it up and moved it to the sewing machine, and this kite came out very flat. And even over time, it's been up for about a year, it stays flat. It's a good technique, and I'll use it for the rest of my days. So let's do some prep work now. Okay, we've gathered all our supplies we're going to need for constructing the tail. The poster board. I like to keep an extra couple of pieces of poster board for sneaking in cuts. You'll see how I use those in a minute. Some straight edges, metal, so you don't burn them. Some fixative for the board. I like Loctite spray adhesive because it stays tacky for quite a while. And for actually fixing the surface down, I like Gutermann's HT2 or Fabri-Tac, which I can get locally. It's a little handier. Gutermann's never fails, but it's a little harder to find. You'll need a hot cutter. I use my $8 Weller 25 watt And then a bunch of material. My kite, my tail today is going to be primarily blue and green, and I'll throw in some grays and whites, and I like to throw in like 20-25% black. I really think it makes the tail pop in the sky. It really shows off the colors well. It's like a frame or something. I don't know how to describe it. You'll need some pencils for marking on the paper eventually, on the tail, sorry. I have a dark one, a charcoal gray, and a white one. They're both water soluble. I get them at Quilting Supply. And then they work in mechanical pencils, and they are washable. They go away if you put them in the wrong place or you want to get rid of the coloring. And they're very fine tipped also. I like that. Other than that, you'll have the ubiquitous blue tape, and I think we're ready to go. Now that we've got all our materials together, I've started laying out the tail pattern on the board. I've started with a alternating green-black stripe pattern. I found striping shows up pretty well on the finished tail. I tend to do things in straight lines, because then when it comes to add another piece, it goes on pretty easily. And when I go to the edge, I overshoot the edge by 3/4 inch. That way when I sew past the edge and then hot cut it off, I get a nice finished edge. As we go along, you'll notice that every single edge on the tail is going to be hot cut, so there shouldn't be any unraveling problems no matter how old your material is. As we go along, I'm going to be hot tacking the pieces together. That way when we're all done laying everything out, we can peel the whole thing up, and hopefully all those hot tacks hold, and it'll be ready to go to the sewing table. You can also use a little fabric cement in there if you're having material that's not wanting to stay together. So I'll speed things up here and build some tail. Okay, we've finished laying out all the pieces on the tail. We're almost ready to peel it up and move it to the sewing machine. But the first most important part is to go back with a straight edge and my marking pencils and mark all these lines from the bottom of the cardboard here up to the material itself. That way when we come off the machine, I don't have to refit it back onto the board. I can just hot cut wherever those lines are. So let's try that now. Okay, I guess the time has come to pull it up. And there it is. All set to move to the sewing machine. Okay, we're ready to start sewing. I'll insert a picture of my stitch. I like to use a stair stepper stitch, and I like to use a very light tension. And as we're sewing, as much as possible, start and stop outside the margins. And when you have to start and stop inside the margins, use a lock step. I'll speed things up and we'll get through this. I always miss some trim pieces, but I'll pick them up later on in the construction. Now off to the tail. Okay, now that we have the modules, the body of the tail constructed, we're going to put together the head and the split tails. So I've drawn out on the same board, I've drawn out some strips that'll end up being the split tail. This top one that goes from 3 to 3 1/4 inch, and another one exactly the same. And in between I've got the lead, the head of the kite, the tail, excuse me. It's going to be 4 1/2 at this end, so that it'll match up at the end of one of the modules in our kite body. And then at the end it goes down to 1 1/2. And I'm cutting out a little nylon piece. I'll insert a picture here. I just cut this out of the top of I think a yogurt container, coffee container. It have this similar nylon top on it, and it adds good stiffness and strength, and you can sew right through it. That's why I use that material. So let's piece together some ripstop here and get going. Oh, you will notice that the tail and the head, I'm going to make primarily black. I think that's a good accent. It really frames the rest of the tail. So I'll speed things up and get through this part. Okay, this guy should be ready for the sewing machine too. Pretty simple. One more item we're going to need for the tail. A typical tail will shred if you just let it go crazy in the wind. So I've tried many different things. I'm trying a new thing this year. I'm taking like a 6-inch strip of material, cutting some slits down the middle of it, give it a twist, turn it over, and then glue them together. And then I wrap this up a little bit and glue it, and I end up with like a fuzzy tail, but it won't flap in the breeze. So hopefully these at the tips of the two forked tails will slow things down and make the tips survive a season or two. Then if they do get shredded, you just snip them off and do it again, and you're good for another season or two. Okay, we'll call that good, and we're ready to cut them out. Now that we're off the sewing machine, we can cut out our modules. The lines are already drawn, so it should be a pretty quick process. And there's our collection of modules. And now we're ready to cut out the tail the same way. There's our pieces, all ready to assemble. Okay, I've taken all the pieces out to a sunny spot in my living room and placed them end to end and repositioned them, and I think I have them in a good order now. I like how they blend into each other. The stripes are all spaced out. I think it looks good. So I'll just pick them up in this order, take them back to the sewing room, and piece them together. Ready to start assembling the kite. I'm going to start off by getting the leading end of the kite, of the tail, sorry, and trimming it off at 45 degrees. We're going to get this pretty close because we're going to trim it one more time after we're all assembled. But for right now, we're just going to hot tack it as it is. Get it ready for the sewing machine. Okay, at this point, before we attach the forked tails to the rest of the tail, we want to turn over this edge right here and hem it. And then turn this edge over here and hem it. So that when we attach everything to the kite, then we just have to do the outside hem. And the inside hems will already be finished. Okay, this is a good time to introduce my hemming tool. It's a small piece of nylon. It's got some edging on it. And what I'm going to be doing is pushing the material up against that just before it slides into the needle. So I have my little measurement tool here. I'm going to set for about 1/8 inch. Nice straight edge. Voila. Okay, first of all, now that these are all hemmed up, let's cut them off at 45 degrees. Get them ready to attach to the rest of the tail. Okay, all ready for the sewing machine again. I'm going to do these one at a time and do it in fast motion, but you get the idea. Okay, now that we have the tail all sewn together, we're going to do some preparation. We want to eventually edge the tail from one tip of the fork tail all the way up to the toe point, and then around back down the other side to the other tip of the other fork tail. So it'll all be one continuous sew all the way around the tail. First step I'm going to do is take where the toe point meets the module meets the first other module of the body of the tail. Those corners where it turns are a little bit sloppy, so we're going to take our hot edge, our hot tip, and just snip off and smooth that whole corner. Smooth this one also. That'll make the edging much easier to do right there. Also, if any of your other joints where the modules come together are a little sloppy, now's the time you can trim them. The other preparation is I've already glued on my reinforcement piece on the toe point. We'll fold those over in preparation for sewing, and I'll probably just glue those in place to make it easy to get around that corner. And then down on the tips of the fork tail, I'm going to snick those off, just hot cut them off, make them nice and neat, and then glue those guys in preparation for that final edging. So let's do those first. Once these guys are set, I'm going to run down and just fold all the edging all the way around, and after that it'll be ready for the sewing machine. So here we go. I'm going to start on this end of the tail, the fork tail I should say. Go up this side, turn the corner at the other end, and then it should come down and finish right there. After that, we just have the bridle point to finish up, and we'll have a tail. So off to the sewing machine. Okay, back on the sewing machine. I'm going to set up my straight edge sewing guide. There, that ought to put the zigzag right in the middle of the hem, the edging. Little cleanup to do, and that looks good. I didn't check my bobbin, so it's a good thing I am building a short tail. Okay, we've got the tail all sewn up. Looks pretty good. The last step is put a string in at the toe point. For that I use my fine woodworking tool. Hot cut through. And there's the tow line that's ready to go. If you look how the tail turned out, some of the edging in here, you won't see loose threads. Everything's cut off nice. All the edges are hot cut. This should last years and years. Before I let you go, one quick aside. At the beginning of this project, we guesstimated that this tail would be just under 15 feet, and I just measured it and it came out to 14 feet 2 inches. So just to show that this technique it'll predict how long your tail is going to be. Worked pretty good for us. So now I'll see you on the beach.